Hello YouTube, my name is Tyler and this is going to be a 2022 reading goals recap and a little bit of chatting about what I want to accomplish in 2023 with my reading. So yesterday I rewatched my 2022 reading goals video, which was like one of the very first videos I posted on my channel. So I rewatched it to see what my goals were, and I took some notes on my phone so I could talk about what I accomplished and didn't accomplish. So I started out with saying that my Goodreads reading goal I set at 100 books for the year. I very much accomplished that. I'm currently at 159 books that I have read this year. I think I'll probably end up at like 161, 162. I'm reading very slowly this month. I'm not getting a lot read, but I am working on a couple things right now. I'll be in the 160s in some capacity by the end of December. So the reading challenge has not opened up yet for setting your goal for next year, but I'm thinking my goal will be like either 110 or 115. I kind of looked back at my previous challenges to see what I had set for them and what I actually hit. This is the most I've read in any year by far. The last couple years I hit 105 books, so even by that standard, I read a lot more this year. And part of that is because of this channel making me feel like I have to keep reading. So I want it to be higher than 105 since that seems to kind of be my baseline. But I also don't want it to be too awfully high because maybe this year was a fluke. So somewhere in that range is what my goal will be for next year. Then I talked about how I had just like a ton of books on my Goodreads TBR and a bunch of physical books on my TBR. I didn't actually check Goodreads, but I said that my TBR was around 120, and I wanted to read from my TBR page more often. My TBR is currently at 116, so it's maybe marginally smaller than it was at the beginning of the year. However, one of the goals I said was I wanted to read one physical TBR book and one Goodreads shelf TBR book a month. And I do think for the most part, I kind of accomplished that. Maybe not necessarily my physical TBR. I don't think I read a physical book off my TBR once a month, but I definitely at least read one book off my Goodreads TBR a month. And I think I still kind of want to prioritize that. My physical TBR was at 13 books. I should have counted before I came down here. I think it's like at 18 currently. I have some here and then I have some upstairs. The ones upstairs are the ones I feel like I'm more likely to read soon, while these are like books that I'm like when the mood strikes. So the physical TBR has gone up, which makes sense because I'm buying more books than I have in the past. But I'm still feeling pretty confident at how well I'm doing about reading off my TBR, even if the numbers don't show it. What I want to do in 2023 is I want to track my TBR reading a little more efficiently. Maybe I'll do a reading journal setup video, but the journal I'm planning on using for my reading journal next year has not shown up yet. I found out about the journal that I wanted to use kind of late in the year, and so it's not going to be shipped until after the holidays. So I'll probably do a little bit more tracking in this year's journal just because I have a few pages left, so it should be able to get me at least through the beginning of January till my book can arrive, or my journal can arrive. But I want to be a little bit better about tracking which books that I have read that came from my TBRs of either sort. Just because with like the finishing and then adding, like the way things get added on Goodreads, you know, at the beginning of the month, I might have the same number at the beginning of the month and the end of the month. However, I read 3 books that were on the TBR and I just happened to add 3 more books because I watched a Kayla video or something and she read a bunch of books that sounded interesting. You know, I've been catching up on her vlogs. I'm like way behind because I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks, which has eaten into YouTube time. But so I've been catching up and I watched her like my favorite horror books vlog. Well, it wasn't even a vlog, it was a video. I watched that the other day and that added a bunch of books to the TBR because I was at like 112 and now I'm at like 116. So I want to track that a little bit better. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do that, and it's going to depend on once I physically get the journal and setting it up and trying it out to see how that will work. But that is my goal. And I think even though I have this physical TBR, like books that I have in my home, I think I'm going to write them down in my journal for better like tracking purposes when I like do these videos, especially in my wrap-ups at the end of the month, where I kind of keep you apprised of my TBR stats. I end up going and like trying to find all the books through the house and counting them that way. And I think it would just be better if I had them written in my journal, my reading journal, and then I can cross off the ones that I have finished and add books as I get them. I don't want to do my whole entire TBR that way because I take things off and add things constantly to my Goodreads one, but my physical one, that seems like something that's doable. So that's one of my goals, is just better about tracking my TBR, especially as I continue to try and keep it somewhat manageable. When talking about my TBR, I also talked about how I wanted to clear it out on Goodreads somewhat regularly because there were so many old books that I didn't even know if I wanted to still read. So I feel like I've been doing that more than usual in the last year. I feel like I've been clearing it out, kind of scrolling through things and taking off things that don't sound as interesting to me anymore on a more regular basis than I used to. I think I might try and set this up to be a like actual to-do that I do maybe like once a quarter. I have a to-do list program app on my phone, and I can set reoccurring tasks with varying lengths of time. So I could do weekly, monthly, whatever. So I might set up one of those in my phone to do every like quarter, just to kind of keep things clear, make sure the stuff on my TBR is still stuff I want to read. But I feel like I have been managing it pretty well this year. So another goal I had mentioned was I wanted to read more indigenous authors in 2022 because I just really had not read anything from indigenous authors. And in talking about it, I thought I was going to read a lot of nonfiction. I honestly didn't read any nonfiction from indigenous authors or about indigenous authors this year, but I did read 2 books, or maybe 3. I think it was 2 books that I read by indigenous authors this year. One was a short story collection, and then one was the part-time Indian book by Alexi Sherman. So I was kind of successful. I did not read as much as I had hoped for, but I did read some. So that's like partially successful. I think this is a goal I'm going to continue into 2023. I still want to read the indigenous people's history of the United States, or some nonfiction along those lines. I still want to read Alazzo, which was by one of the authors in the short story collection I read, Darcy Little Badger. I still want to read that. I would still like to expand more into indigenous authors. this year, find more that I like, things like that. And with that, I also want to make more of an effort of reading the Toni Morrison books. I don't have Jazz here. I have a copy of Jazz, so I would like to read that at least in 2023. But in my reading journal that I'm using this year, I have a little tip-in that has all of her like novels, standalone stories, not essays or anything like that, because I don't really like reading essays, to be quite honest. So I have those books written down so I can mark them off when I finish them. So I think I would like to prioritize reading a good chunk of those books in 2023. Maybe not all of them, but more of them, at least Jazz, because I own that book. But yeah, I would like to read more of Toni Morrison's work, especially because every time I have read one, I have just like absolutely loved the book. So more Toni Morrison in 2023. So that's a goal. Let's see, what else? Another goal I had, which I had completely forgot about, was reading the Goodreads choice winners. This was very interesting to me. I had completely forgot about it. And honestly, I thought I had not done a good job on it because I had not been focusing on it really. But the 3 books that I had mentioned in that video were Crying in H Mart, Anthropocene Reviewed, and Lore Olympus. And I read all 3 of those. And I also attempted to read Project Hail Mary, which was one of the Goodreads choice winners. I DNF'd it, but I attempted to read it. I had this big goal of like, maybe I could read like half of the winners this year. I think a lot of these goals were like trying to give me ideas, thinking that like, I wouldn't know what to read this year. And like, I really had no problem finding things to read in 2022 based on the 160 some odd books that I will have read this year. So like, I just didn't need that. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing this in 2023. It's not like a big motivator for me. And honestly, when I was looking at the titles, I had read a couple. I have one on my TBR. I think House of Hunger was one of them. And like, that's checked out to me right now. The ones that are interesting to me, I'll read when I get around to it, or I've had already read it. Like, the memoir winner was I'm Glad My Mom Died, which I read this year. So like, the things that already are kind of interesting to me, I will have read or will have been on my TBR, and I'll get around to it when I get around to it. So I don't feel like this was a goal that was actually motivating or interesting to me. I had talked about it being like a way to get out of my comfort zone, but like, I can find ways to get outside of my comfort zone without reading Goodreads choice winners, if that makes sense. And then my final goal that I had mentioned in this video was I wanted to be able to read a chapter book in Finnish. I wanted just to focus on my Finnish learning more in 2022. I was like kind of successful with this. I did read a graphic novel in Finnish, but I was going back and forth with the English a lot. So it wasn't just like I sat down and read a book in Finnish, which was kind of the goal. And it also was not a chapter book, but it did feel like a good stepping stone. I think I'll try and read it again sometime in 2023. However, I did definitely fall off with practicing my Finnish. Once like the weather started to warm up, I just didn't want to be cooped up working on my Finnish workbook or playing Duolingo on my phone. However, I have gotten back into Duolingo recently. Finnish in-laws might be coming to the States sometime next year. So I kind of want to brush up a little bit more. So maybe I could practice IRL with real people in the future, which means I need to get better than where I'm at now. So yeah, that's kind of where my 2022 goals were. So my 2023 goals are like not a whole lot different, but they do look slightly different. So I still want to be reading off my TBR. However, I do want to track the books that I am reading off my TBR a little more efficiently so I can actually see if I'm accomplishing my TBR goals. So I still think like at least one book off both physical and Goodreads TBR is a good goal to have. So I want to be able to track that a little more efficiently for my own benefit. I still want to read more Indigenous authors in 2023. And on top of that, I want to read more Toni Morrison in 2023. So those are like the big broad goals for my year. Oh, and then my Goodreads book total will be somewhere between 110 and 115 books for this year. So those are the big goals. There's nothing too like crazy. I know some people have like very detailed, very specific reading goals. You know, I just don't read like that, especially because I'm such a big food reader, but I do like having these more broad type goals to kind of help steer me through my reading year and kind of help me decide on what I do want to read, especially when there are times when I can't figure out what to read. So these more broad goals are helpful. So yeah, I talked about this way longer than I expected. But that is what 2022 looked like and what 2023 will be shaped by. I will see y'all next week. Bye.